That's fabulous. Thank you so much, Sandra, and thank you for all the work that's gone into preparing this evening and welcoming everybody here. Hi, I'm John Sloper and run an organisation called Help and Kindness. It's great to see so many friendly faces and familiar faces here this evening. Thank you very much for joining. Um, we've been involved with the Sustainable Food Places movement for a little while now at Help and Kindness and with Dorset Can and Bridport Food Matters as well. And we felt it was important to ask the question of people across Dorset as to whether this might be a useful thing for us to constellate our work around anything to do with food. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Sustainable Food Places movement, the principles behind it is to really see things in the round. That if we're going to talk about creating sustainable, resilient food that is fair and just and available and nutritious and is good for people and good for the places we live, we kind of need to see the whole thing in its big, messy, complicated picture. And what the Sustainable Food Places Network, which is a national network, well, across the whole of the UK, um, what it does is it brings together things under a number of strands, which kind of gives us the full spectrum of the range of things that's involved in our food supply, our food processing, and our food consumption in the UK. And so they have six themes. There's one around food governance and strategy. So that's looking at how we interface with things like national food strategies and policy and so on. We have a good food movement theme as well, one which is about building public awareness about food citizenship and how we support people to engage with what is good food and how we are all involved in that, whether we maybe think we are or not. That's the choices we make around our food and where it comes from are influencing that good food movement all the time. There's a theme around healthy food for all, which is linked to things like tackling food poverty. And it's great to have a number of people here this evening who are in the front line of that work, who are supporting people who are really struggling to feed themselves because of the financial situations they're in. It also covers things like diet-related ill health and access to affordable, healthy food. It also includes things like diabetes and diet related and nutrition related ill health. Sustainable food economy is the fourth one. So this is about producers. It's about the way that our food markets work and how we can make those into something that is good for everybody. So good for the people that are growing, good for the people that are converting the raw materials of food into lovely things to eat, and those that are selling that to us, so that it's good across the whole piece. The fifth theme is catering and procurement. So this is where we have large scale questions about how do we encourage people to purchase food that is grown and manufactured locally, and revitalizing our local supply chains. So instead of the food being grown here and shipped elsewhere to be sold and used, could we do more to be able to buy our food locally in the various different parts of our local economy? So whether that is from our public sector buying food for the hospitals and schools, or whether it's about our hospitality sector selling and buying more local food in the hotels and restaurants and bars and so on across the county. And then the sixth one is food for the planet. And obviously, we can't talk about growing food without talking about the land and the places that we grow food and its impact then in the way that that interacts with our climate emergency. So using and considering concepts and ideas around food and how it's grown as a way to mitigate and to improve our response to our nature emergency through things like sustainable food and farming and looking at food waste and how we manage that. So the Sustainable Food Places model gives us a spectrum of things that we can look at. And over the last couple of years, we've been picking out various of those themes and clustering our conversations around the people that are working in that space and bringing them to the fore. And on our website at Help and Kindness, we host, and I'll put a link in the chat, a section which is all about the Feeding Dorset Partnership. and it lists various people who are involved and activities that are involved in each of those 6 themes. So you can have a look at that. We welcome and actively encourage and are delighted when people come forward and say, we've got something that's working in that space. Would you put a link in there? Because we'd like to be seen and connect into that and be recognised as part of the engagement with all of these themes. So you'll find lots of amazing, inspiring people and projects in there. There's lots of ongoing work in different themes on those different themes that we've just mentioned. The meeting this evening is really important for us in this context. We've had a number of conversations about land use, about local challenges and opportunities to consider the growing of food in Dorset collectively, to have these sorts of big conversations. And this year, we're taking this conversation through to the COP. So those of you that might be aware, Dorset has had, this will be the 3rd year that it's run a conference of parties. This one is going to be in Sturminster Newton at the beginning of November. And at that meeting, we are going to be having 2 themes to do with food, front and center for the whole day, for the work that we're putting in. This is one of those 2 themes that we want to take to the COP. We really want you to be able to influence what we talk about, to shape some of the discussions that we can expand on and explore together, maybe in the room if you're able to join us there, but to be a real feature, a real highlight of what we understand collectively between us about the challenges of growing food and our land use in Dorset, and how we can make it more sustainable, and how much amazing work is already going on in Dorset in this area too, to shine a light on that. And it's fabulous to see so many people in the room tonight who are already up to their eyeballs and beyond in doing this work. And so we invited the speakers to contribute to this evening, to give us a grounding. We're very keen on, well, personally, I know about this much about most of these things, but going through this process, I learn something along the way all the time. And just being able to kind of share these things, realizing that there are possible points of connection where we can give each other a cheer and an encouragement, or we can work together, or we can start to see opportunities that are greater because we are having these conversations collectively. All of these things are what we hope to achieve through being part of this network that we call the Feeding Dorset Partnership, and also the Bridport Sustainable Food Place as well. So joining up those connections, seeing this as a kind of 360-degree picture of what food looks like and sustainable food looks like in Dorset. And this conversation tonight is a really precious one in my mind. This is one where we can start to look at the very beginnings of our food production and our land use conversation to see what it is that where do we start from? Where does this journey start? What happens to the food that's grown? What are the challenges for the people growing it? And how can we muster together to find ways to grow and support people who are growing food in a more sustainable way and a more connected way with the people of Dorset as well. So I really warmly welcome you all to tonight's conversation. We're going to hear from some amazing speakers, and then we're going to have some discussions to see what this might look like, where we might go, inspired by the people that we're going to listen to, and thinking ahead to some of those practical things we might want to take forward for a bigger discussion and more action when it comes to looking at the COP in November. So very warm welcome to you all. Post any questions in the chat as you go along rather than interrupt, I think, and then we can come back to those, and then there'll be a Q&A, as Sandra said, at the second half of the meeting. So thank you all. And Sandra, if I can hand back to you just in case I've missed anything.
No, that's fantastic, John. Thank you very much. And yes, we have got some fantastic speakers tonight. We have 3 farmers from Dorset, but to start the evening, we have a guest speaker from just across the border in East Devon. And I invited Anna Bromley from In My Backyard and Good Food Loop to come and speak with us from a slightly different perspective, in the sense of looking at joining up and networking and how to bring online food markets together. I'll let Anna talk about that, but so it's a slightly different perspective from the other 3 speakers. Anna.
Hi, thank you. It's lovely to see such a full Zoom. Lots and lots of people interested in this topic. It's fantastic. So I um, started within my backyard 4 years ago and joined Good Food Loop around about 3 years ago. In my backyard, unfortunately, folded this summer, and therefore I feel fairly qualified to talk about some of the blocks within this topic. It was a local online food hub specializing or solely agroecological and organic food, um, uh, almost exclusively from Devon, but with little forays into um, areas in other areas in the southwest. Um, and the Good Food Loop is a distribution network that used to link us in East Devon with another food hub down in the Tamar Valley. Now it still runs, but it stops in Exeter. It's a shared distribution network, and it's run on the basis of short supply chains and wanting to break the supermarket mold and stranglehold over the food economy, and offering a very real alternative that offers much fairer pay for producers, whether they're primary producers like a farmer or secondary producers like a manufacturing organisation. Um, so I wanted to, first of all, I wanted to kind of buck the inclination to just go straight in with blogs. I wanted to, first of all, talk about some opportunities as I see them, um, because I want to have the time to make sure that people are aware that the Good Food Loop is very much alive and awake at the moment, and looking actively for partnerships, because of our food hub folding. There's very much an opportunity to tap into that network and be able to access a greater variety of still local and very much sustainable food. I also wanted to put sort of my perspective. I remember hearing at a talk about a year or so ago about just quite how important local spend is for the local economy. And I believe the metric is that for every pound spent in a local organisation, £2.50 is benefited within that local economy. It has an uplift because of the way that money is spent, versus if you were to spend that same pound in a supermarket, then it's about 30p that benefits the local economy. So I think there are huge, huge financial drivers behind this, and for why it's important, not just because it's a good thing to do, not just because it's worthy, not just because it's sustainable, not just because of climate, but it makes financial sense for the local economy. It doesn't make financial sense for a shareholder, but it does make a difference to people on the ground. And I see a huge opportunity for synergies and partnerships, and community building and the way that communities work together and how people can help each other. There's huge opportunities around education, because I think a lot of the barriers are around knowledge and actually knowing what's available, how to access it, and how to have help accessing it. And then there's the nuts and bolts stuff like the IT systems as well, and having access to an IT system that's going to help you and not hinder you. And I certainly am a big supporter of the Open Food Network, which is what we've used, and I'm happy to answer questions about Open Food Network if anybody's interested in that. So to move to blocks, I kind of feel like the ones that I'm most interested, obviously there's financial blocks. I think we're all aware that we're living in a very different financial climate now as opposed to like 4 years ago when I first got involved in local food. It's so much tighter now than it ever has been, and that really affects customers' spending power and decision making. And I still see lots of enthusiasm to buy locally if it's convenient enough, and if it, you know, if it works for customers. But scale is one of the issues that I think that I certainly see from my perspective, and I certainly see it affecting farms and producers. But it definitely affected us. I think there's a sweet spot with scale. And there's lots of blocks and barriers if you're too small, and obviously having issues with actually making your organization work. That's one of the things that affected us in the end, is that we shrank so much that we became unworkable as an organization. We didn't have any slack left in the system. We pared everything back, and you need to have a certain number of customers to make it work, whatever your business is. But I equally see scale being a barrier on a larger scale as well. So I think if you want to be truly local and sustainable, it actually works against you if you get beyond a certain scale as well, because I think then it becomes the organization becomes a machine of its own, and you end up having to make decisions that go against your principles about sustainability just in order to meet the needs of your customers. So I would look at an organization, for instance, like Riverford, the fantastic organization, organic organisation in the southwest, but more and more of their decisions have led to them becoming more and more like an alternative to a supermarket, but still operating in a similar kind of way economically. And when you consider food miles and where the food's coming from, very often, even within the Riverford model, you'll get unnecessary food miles as things get carted up and down the country. I think one of the things that I felt very much was a very delicate balance for us was around how many local producers we had coming into, and it's the same for the food loop as well, with the producers for that too. There is a diminishing number, certainly within the areas that I work in, of agroecological, sustainable primary producers. And I think the way in which farms are supported now, there's more and more farms I see going out of business. Now, I also do see new farms coming online from time to time, but I know that very much has affected our business, and I think anything that can be done to look at how to support the producers beyond spending your money with them, I think is a good thing. Because I see one of the barriers I saw with a number of our farms was that the farms were earning so little from what they were doing. They were on things like universal credit, and in one instance, I think the farmer was on a caring allowance because of their partner's ill health, and they couldn't expand and earn more, because if they did, it would then affect the way, so the way the benefits were structured, it would affect the benefits they were receiving. So they were in this sort of stymied position where they might have wanted to grow a little and couldn't. I think that it can be difficult to communicate how a food organisation that's like a middleman is going to help a producer or help a customer, because obviously it means that some of the money in the system is being channeled into this organising energy. But I think it can help with things like marketing, shared, sort of anything that's shared means that the workload is shared as well. And I think that it, it can be hard sometimes to convince a farmer who's not earning very much from what they're doing to share some of their income with an organisation that's then going to help them sell and reach more people. So I think it's certainly, if anybody is interested in looking at food hubs and setting up a food hub, I think they're brilliant things to have. But I think they have to start from a place of really strong buy-in from a number of producers that would key into that. I think for us, we've had staffing barriers. In my backyard was not quite exclusively run by volunteers. So I received a small amount of remuneration for what I did, and everybody else was supporting the business on a voluntary basis, and that has all sorts of barriers and blocks, I think, associated with that. And burnout, I've written down here. I think it's really important to recognise how big a barrier that can be within the system, be it people who are running organisations or the farms themselves, and the way that people are supported producing. I think that's something that I feel needs addressing. Skills is sort of on a similar level, that, you know, sort of producers, unless they've had a different career before they've become a producer, they're not, their skill set is not usually in things like sales and marketing, and it can be very, I've seen time and time again that time is often a barrier to doing more of that, and knowing sometimes exactly where to start and how much of your energy to put into all these different aspects. I think something to address as well is that as a society, we're becoming more and more digital, and everything is more and more online, and cash is disappearing more and more. But there are very strong undercurrents as well, and numbers of people who feel very strongly that they want to use cash. They don't want to be in this cashless, digitized place. And very often, those are the people who want to access your food. So if you use a digital-only system, that can make accessibility hard, I think, for some people. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, because I think it can water down the number of customers potentially that you can have. I think there's a lot around education and people understanding seasonality, and also understanding how to use ingredients as well. Like we've had a revamp in our local Tesco's, and it's horrible. Like, you walk through the aisles and it's almost all processed food. The amount of fresh food in there is getting minimised and minimised, and I think the skills that people have to create food, and the recognition, I think, of some ingredients as well. I think there's a lot that can be done to talk about why things are seasonal and how to enjoy seasonality. And I know there's lots of celebrity chefs who have engaged with that and encouraged people to think about that. But I think if that isn't addressed, whatever you do will only reach a small number of people who are already engaged with understanding what those are and understanding how to use them. It's slightly controversial perhaps, but I've put down here pernicious capitalism as a barrier. I don't know what exactly the right terminology would be, and it's not about partisan politics. It is purely about our choice to be led by money as a very wide society, as opposed to each of us as individuals. But we are part of a system, whether we like it or not, that is dominated by making some money, and I think the more we can think about how we can break out of that rigidity, I think the better for anything done on a sustainable system. And location, I think, is one of the last ones as well. I think we've found in many ways that doing things in a sustainable way in a rural area is more challenging, because it takes more miles and more time to either for the customer to reach the producer, or for producers to reach the customer. And I would say a lot of the blocks and barriers we have both in Good Food Loop and had in My Backyard were to do with location and logistics around location, and decisions about, do we home deliver or do we have collection points, all those kinds of things, and how we run those. So I think that's covering what I felt were the important things.
Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, I guess
yes,
just
sorry, just
one last thing is that I think the blocks are very circular and cyclical and very enmeshed with each other, and I think any solution needs to be, rather than a linear solution or something in isolation, I think it is about bringing a whole range of solutions to knitting them together.
Anna, thank you so much. That's opening the space with so much food for thought, and responding directly to so many of the 6 themes introduced by John. Really thank you for that. If we can, Mary Durling from Little Oak Farm, if you could introduce yourself and then, yes, share your experience with us. You're muted at the moment.
Right, hello. Yes, I'm here. Okay. Okay, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Mary Durling, and I have a small farm about 10 miles west of Bridport. When I say small, it really is very small. It's just under 6 acres. And on my farm, I have sheep for meat, chickens for eggs, a couple of good-sized polytunnels, a vegetable garden, and I do a fair bit of processing as well. I make and sell apple juice and cordials, sauces, chutneys, all those sorts of things. So that's what I do. So what I'm thinking are the barriers are, I'll sort of run through them and then I'll talk about them more. So the first biggest barrier, I think, is access to land. You can't produce any food without it. The price of land and the planning system, those 3, they're all huge. Food prices are way too low, so farming doesn't pay. Economy of scale, that Anna talked about a bit, and the lack of outlets and decent ways of selling. I know there's lots of good schemes on the go, but on the whole, climate change, absolutely massive. And then, and lastly, I put butterflies, which might not seem like a big problem, but they were this year. Access to land. So basically, a little bit of history. Before there were cars, people had to live close to what they needed, which way back was water, and then more recently work and shops and schools and so on. And when cars came along and suddenly people could live out in the countryside, and they did, because it's nice, and then it became apparent that there had to be some control over development. And so in 1947 we got the Town and Country Planning Act, and so that controlled, that people couldn't just go and build whatever they wanted. And so effectively that made land quite scarce and prices went up. And so the value of accommodation went up and the price of land generally. And more recently now, if you're trying to buy land, you are competing with massive corporations who are buying land for carbon offsetting. I knew this lovely couple, they were absolutely determined to buy some land. They were going to every single auction, and every time the parcel of land went to somebody that wasn't in the room. They were off somewhere in a city just bidding online, and the auctioneer said yes for carbon offsetting. So you're competing, there's a lot of competition with that kind of thing, biofuels, solar panels, and so on and so forth. Things, tourism, things where what you're going to get back for your investment is far more than you're ever going to get with farming. Horsey people, they've just got loads of money often, and they can outbid you as well. And so it just seems that the farmers are at the bottom of the list of the people who can afford to buy land and live in the countryside, and yet they're the ones who really need to be there. If you want to rent land, it's really, really hard. Thatcher changed lots of the tenancy rules, making it hard to rent land. It's very hard to get a long-term rolling tenancy, and loads of the county farms have been sold off. So access to land is a big problem, and one of the main things that's putting people off going into farming. That and the planning system. If you can afford to buy land that already has a house and barns and whatnot on it, then that's great, whoopee. But if you can't, then you have to buy bare land and apply for planning permission, which is what I've been doing. And just a brief bit of history about my planning story. I thought getting planning permission on agricultural land would be pretty straightforward for agricultural buildings. I'm talking about not residential, but just for farm buildings. But it took me 5 years, 3 planning applications, and I finally had to go to appeal. Then I moved on, and I've been building up my infrastructure and whatnot, and now the planners have said, okay, you've got to actually apply for planning permission now. I expect some of you will be familiar with Simon Fairley and the Land magazine and whatnot. Well, this is how Simon describes the planning system in this country. He said, if you can imagine some sort of tribal rite of passage, and there's a corridor of people like a tunnel, and you have to run through that tunnel, and as you run through, they're all hitting you with sticks. That's what the planning system in this country is like. It's not like that on the continent. On the continent, they know that we need new entrants into farming, and they actually help you, but not over here. So what you have to do to be allowed to get planning permission, residential, you have to prove that you need to live on the land, and you need to prove that you're viable. Anyway, they just set all the bars so high. You're expected to earn, well, I'm expected to earn way more money than I actually need. Way more than most farmers in this country earn. 30% of the farms in this country, this is big farms as well, don't make a profit, but I'm expected to, and I do, and it's fine, I do. But whether it'll satisfy them or not, I don't know. There were lots of organisations campaigning around all this sort of stuff. The Land is Ours was Chapter 7, the Land magazine, more recently the Land Workers Alliance. Just campaigning to make it easier for genuine farming enterprises to be able to get onto the land, develop a farm, and produce food, particularly small ones. But this government and many previous governments just seem determined to say the value of farming and not give it the importance that it needs. And this is an attitude, the attitude to farmers and farming. I think it's something that is actually quite widespread in society. I find it very upsetting, quite mind-boggling, the lack of respect that farmers in this country have. I think there needs to be a programme of education to teach people what it actually means to farm. I don't know how much good, what's he called, Jeremy Clarkson's done. He's giving people a bit of an idea, but it's not, I mean, that's a different kind of farming, isn't it? But just, the amount of skills that you need to have, how much knowledge, just on such a broad level. I mean, somebody mentioned marketing. I mean, that's just like a whole nother thing as well. But, the growing of the crops and/or animal husbandry, soil chemistry, the grass and the different types and what they all need, all the bureaucracy, the rules, the standards, the laws, the veterinary knowledge, mechanics, weather, pests. All the new innovations that are coming in, biological controls, all that sort of thing, trying to keep up with all of that. And then just how much stamina and tenacity and patience you need. And of course, there's lots of professions that need a huge amount of skill and knowledge and patience and whatnot. I mean, nursing, for example. But I think they're probably more publicly recognised and appreciated than farmers are. And I think that's quite a shame. But I think, if we want a good local, sustainably produced food system, these are the sorts of issues that we need to look at and to change. Food prices. So in the middle of the 1500s, the 1900s, at the same time that the price of land was going up, the price of wheat was falling, and then that seems to affect everything else and lots of other food, probably because of the introduction of artificial fertilizers and mechanization, those two things. It suddenly became much easier to produce wheat, and supply and demand, it just therefore became a lot cheaper. And coupled with the fact, it was a sort of you almost get a graph, this sort of shape, with wheat prices falling and land prices rising, and suddenly it became, the accommodation, paying for your accommodation took up a lot more of your wages than paying for your food. And I've noticed that people will readily pay for luxuries, but they don't want to pay for essentials. For instance, Thomas and Lally at Springtail Farm, just around the corner from here, they do flowers and vegetables. The flowers subsidise the vegetables. People will pay for flowers, but they don't want to have to pay so much for the vegetables. Tourism, loads of farmers are using that to subsidise farming. I make elderflower champagne and I sell it at the events. When I do events and I sell hogget burgers at events, and I sell the elderflower champagne. And out of all the different things that I make off the farm, the champagne is far and away makes the most money for the least amount of work. People pay for luxuries, but they don't want essentials. And I suppose it's just kind of indicative. We're all just so spoiled here in the West. We really are. So the result of the low food prices is that farmers can't earn enough, really, because food is too cheap. The other things, what else is making food production tricky? Economies of scale. Yeah, this makes farms get bigger and generally bigger and more specialised, and the traditional mixed farm is becoming a lot less common. But there are lots of ways in which those mixed farms are more sustainable than the big monocrop farms. Lack of outlets and decent ways of selling. It's almost like, you sell to the supermarket or what, how. But, like in my backyard and the GFL, I can't remember what that stood for. But look, yeah, good schemes, lots of veggie box schemes, community village shops coming back, CSAs. I forgot to mention, I've actually got a little honesty box shop down in the village of Wootton, Fitzpaine, and that works really, really well. I sell nearly all my produce through that. Which I'm lucky. I'm obviously in an area without lots of thieving going on. But yeah, people love the little shop. But generally, there's not many outlets. How am I doing time-wise? Probably going over. I mean, climate change.
4 minutes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, climate change is huge, massive, scary. Even just over the last 7 years that I've been here, I'm finding that I'm having to reduce the flock size of the sheep, because we tend to be getting very cold, wet early springs, and then you might get a couple of weeks where the grass will actually grow, and then bam, you're straight into too hot and too dry. This year, for the first year, I didn't make any hay. I had to buy my hay in, because luckily I spotted a neighbour who's got a lot more land than me was making hay, and I was able to buy some bales straight from him, straight off the field. It was a bit of a shock. Yeah, I've never not made hay before, not for a really long time. So yeah, that's and finally, what's the last thing on my list? Oh yes, the butterflies. So it's a very good year for butterflies, apparently, and cabbage whites in particular, and slugs and red spider mites and yeah. So there's a whole lot, battalions, armies out there of things waiting to come and attack your crops. But hedgehogs, I've also got hedgehogs now on my farm, and that makes me very, very happy. So conclusions. This is my just last 3 thoughts. We need a planning system that allows new entrants into farming without breaking them in the process. And at the same time, it needs to be discerning enough to know who really are the farmers, because we do need some control, so there's better, wiser farming policies. We need a public who cares more about sustainability and trying to keep the planet habitable than they do about having all the luxuries and things like that they want to spend the money on, air fryers and Spotify and a new phone and whatnot. But yeah, better to pay for good food, and we want more respect for farmers. So yes, those are my thoughts.
Mary, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. That is just fantastic. I just think, thank you so much. It's really eye-opening for us. Thank you. All kinds of things going up in the air in the screen. This is great. Each set up, yes, way.
Thank you.
Gone are the days of, when we were all doing that. Can't find my camera. Yeah, over lockdown. But now we've got things that we can send up in the air, which is quite fun. Thank you. Okay, so if now we could hear from Alasdair McNabb. Yes, hi Alasdair. If you're ready to share your experience with us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, great.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for organising and inviting me. I rarely get a chance to do anything like this, so I'm very out of practice, and I'm very unprepared, and I've got a propensity to ramble. So I've tried to write a few things down, but I agree with literally everything Mary just said. I will clumsily make my way through these points that I've made. But I'll probably be repeating a lot of things. I am a reasonably new entrant to agriculture. I studied agriculture about 15 years ago, and then I did something else because I had no faith that I could make it on my own as my own boss, and in a way I didn't want to do the rounds and work my way up the ladder to become a farm manager by the time I might be 40 or something like that. And so I decided to go into a different sector, and that ground me down. And so eventually I ended up coming back into farming 3 years ago. I absolutely love what I do. I find it incredibly rewarding, and I feel like I'm doing some good, and therefore I get a lot of gratification from what I do and the food that I produce and the people that I feed and make happy. But I am incredibly pessimistic about I try and look for ways as to how sustainable farming can be, grown and made into a more widespread thing. And sustainable can cover all sorts of ways of farming, but we know what we're looking for. And so I won't nitpick as to the different ways of doing that, but I find it really hard to actually see how this can become a large movement, and so that all of our families in the UK can eat good, nutritious food produced locally or regionally or even nationally. I think it's a crime that we are importing so much food to lesser or greater standards. I think we should be completely self-sufficient in food nationally and regionally and really locally, but we're not, and we're nowhere near it. But I feel that young people in particular can be inspired to start farming or get involved if they only knew how rewarding it can be as a profession. And I see it as an antidote to, what I see as quite a poisonous world out there for young people, and especially with the pressures of social media and the doom and gloom of 24-hour news. So I am very pessimistic about how we do it, but I'm 100% behind why it should be done, if that makes any sort of sense. The barriers, there'll be a lot of repetition here, but access to land is such a hugely difficult thing. The way I see it, if let's just call conventional farming the status quo, we either have to a sustainable farm needs to come from a new entrant to farming who's passionate and is driven to farm in a certain way and produce food, or it has to be a conversion of a conventional farm, and that's almost sometimes as difficult, if not more difficult, than starting a farm from scratch. I don't know which is more hard, but they're both very difficult, because the conventional generational farm is set in their ways and has an unbelievable amount of pressure on them to just keep a hold of the land and pass it on. Never mind do things in a sustainable way or for the better of their land. It is hard enough, even if they own it outright and have no borrowing, just to make a decent living. And there are lots of misconceptions in the media about what landowners and farmers are actually sat on and what they may earn. So I don't know which is more difficult, but it's very difficult going from conventional farming to a sustainable type of farming. But the access to the land is just near on impossible. So I don't know how that becomes better, but I keep coming back to collaboration and cooperatives. So if you are, let's say you own a 300, 400 acre farm, and you want to guarantee that your family makes a profit, then the best and safest way to do that is to just carry on farming as you have done, and to sell your produce to a contracted middle person. So you know that every single ounce of food that you produce is sold, and you can't necessarily control the price of that, and whether you make a profit or not is down to many things: politics, the weather, and the whim of the supermarket or whoever your buyer is. Or in the case of mine and others on here, you have to find the customer yourself. You have to do the farming, the marketing, the sales, the deliveries, the processing, and then you can just about make a profit. But you also need the scale. So then you need the money. And where do you get the money from? So it is quite I'm sorry to be so negative, but it is quite a difficult hill to climb. But yes, you need to be very, what was the word that Mary used? Resilient. There were many words. But I do think that if we have small mixed farms, and that's one route rather than conversion of a large conventional farm, then the farmers need to form cooperatives and sell their food together. But you do run into the problems of certification. Is your farm producing it to the same standard as mine? And what is that standard? And then you've got too many chefs in the kitchen. So negative again, but I do think there's a way of doing that. The willingness to pay is the next barrier, and it's been covered so many times. But even when I go to sell into places that want the best produce, they're still comparing my prices to, the price they get from their wholesaler. I produce eggs and pork, and my business partner produces beef and lamb. And so we always met with the same things, the same reaction to price, apart from when we approach the highest tier of restaurants, where the chef doesn't care what they pay, they just want the best. And that's great. And I'm finding more of these customers, which is also great. But at the same time, we're doing this because we want everyone to eat well, not just the wealthy people. So I have to charge a lot for my food because it costs more to produce, and that is the awkward crux. The thing that I always say when I get remarks about the price of eggs or pork is that the hidden cost of your food that you're comparing mine to is in the welfare of the animal, the quality of the rivers and streams by your house, the quality of life of the worker on the farm, you know, the biodiversity, the wildlife, the birds, everything like that. So that could be quantified quite easily, I should think. And very quickly, because I know I'm probably rambling for far too long, there's a villainisation of farmers, unfortunately, and you know, that is what it is. I think that comes down to getting people excited about going into farming when they're young. Perhaps the farmers could be seen as heroes and not the ones that are just polluting our rivers, etc., etc. And it comes back to the first thing I said. I would never bash a farmer who is farming conventionally, because you just don't know their situation, that they may be doing it because they don't care about the environment, but more often than not, they're doing it because it's all they know and they need to make a living. So it comes back to that. Routes to market. That's an obvious one. I think other than collaboration, farmer cooperatives and that sort of thing, the thing that I think will be a game changer, and it can't be that far away because I've heard things, is when we can easily measure the nutritional value of our food, then customers will see that soil health, animal health is linked directly to, animal and plant health are linked directly to human health. As soon as you can hold your iPhone over a carrot and it tells you that that is X nutrition and that is Y nutrition, and that's why you pay more, hopefully that would be a massive game changer. And it can be done. If I send my egg off to a lab, they can tell me the amino acid profile and the vitamins inside that, antioxidants, etc., and then all of a sudden it's very transparent. So that's where I'm at, and look forward to any questions at the end.
Alasdair, thank you very much. I feel very moved by everything you've said. Coming after Mary, thank you. Not a ramble at all in my hearing. Very, very to the point. So thank you.
Thank you.
And yes, so it would be time for Leila from Tamarisk Farm. Can I see you? Are you there? There you are. Yeah. If you could introduce your farm and yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi. I'm Leila. So compared to the two other farmers you've heard, I actually come from a fairly long established farm. Tamarisk Farm was started in the 60s by my grandparents. Sorry, 1 second.
Next generation.
Sorry, he was not asleep. I thought he was asleep. He woke up. So yeah, so they started the farm in the 60s. We have been organically certified with the Soil Association since before, since certification began. And more recently, we've become certified with the Pasture for Life Association. So pasture for life means that our animals are only fed grass or grass derivatives, so hay and things like that. They don't get any concentrates from soy or other seeds and things like that, grain. And yeah, Alasdair was saying about certification, how valuable is it? What can it do? And one of the things it does is it means that we can sell into the wider market and people know what they're getting. People like Alasdair and Mary and people who buy from us locally, you don't need to be certified because they know you. They can know you as the farmer. They can trust you and what you say and come and see what you do. But because we, as a larger farm, do feed into the wider markets as well, it's beneficial for us to have these certifications because it means that anybody can believe us and trust what we say. And without certification, you're reliant on trusting what you're being told without any reason to do so. And again, small producers, you can talk to them, you can believe what they do. But once you get onto larger scales, especially when you're looking at things where, people are claiming that they're growing things very well, and therefore they can put a higher markup on it, you've got to trust that they are doing what they say they're doing, which does make things slightly harder because we've got a lot of different regulations that we need to follow, and we have a 1 or 2 days in the year when we are audited by the Soil Association to check that we are ticking all the boxes and doing everything that they think we should be doing and we think we should be doing. I'm sort of a little bit at a loss because I was looking through my notes as everybody else was speaking, like, they've said that about planning is really difficult. They've said that about, how marketing is really difficult. They've said that. So everything that I would have said has already been said, which I think goes to show just how much these things really are very much sort of the problems that we've got to work around, really, is because we've all come up with the same points to be talking about. There are a few things I think I can say that haven't yet been said, or I might say again just to reinforce it. Mary's comment about Jeremy Clarkson in his show, while I personally don't like him and his style, I actually do think what he has done has been very beneficial overall. How much that will translate to immediate sales to farmers like us, small producers trying to do, good stuff locally, is debatable. But I do know that he has been speaking to people who otherwise wouldn't have thought about where their food came from. So I think he has done good things for us, and that sort of thing would be really, really good to have people doing more of that. Perhaps someone like River Cottage, who again did brilliant things at the time. We need that kind of perhaps more educational than Jeremy Clarkson, but that sort of outreach I think is really, really beneficial to the sort of things we're talking about. And on a smaller scale, I know that a lot of the schools in Bridport are doing edible gardens, where they've got sort of gardeners coming in and they're working with the children to grow things, and then they're using that produce as part of what they eat in the school lunches. And I think that's really, really beneficial because it helps them understand where their food comes from. An anecdote I have used before and will use again. My husband was a science technician at a secondary school in Hackney, and part of his job he had to watch the kids out in the not playground, there was secondary school, but outside. And he loved this because in the summer there was a mulberry tree, and so he'd stand in the shade of the mulberry tree eating mulberries. And one of the kids came up to him and said, but sir, you don't know where it's been. Tree map, like there was this disconnect between food. So I really do think that sort of educating all of that kind of thing is so important. And sort of there's this societal expectation of having whatever foods you want whenever you want it. So, if you go into the supermarket now, you'll find that there are grapes from Argentina, there are strawberries available, fresh strawberries in October. And, we've become so used to having these available that it's really difficult for people to step back, to even realize that they could choose to step back and think about what is actually seasonal. Where is my food coming from? I often think I love cookbooks, I love reading through them, but I find it really hard to use them because there are so many times that I look at it and go, okay, unless I go into town and buy these ingredients, I don't have them because they're not in season and I don't have them grown in our own market garden here on the farm. And maybe I need to write it. Maybe someone can tell me where I can find it, but I want a cookbook called How to Eat Swiss Chard 5 times a week during the winter and enjoy it. Because, you know, you can do it, it can be done, but it requires rethinking how you expect to eat and things like that. And that is really difficult. I'm not claiming, you know, that I do it very well. I do go to the supermarkets. Well, I try and buy things from, you know, Fruits of the Earth and places like that. But I do buy out of season things occasionally. But I try not to because I know that, you know, then I'm relying on the food miles and somewhere else might be doing it, and it doesn't, you know. Well, sorry, I am definitely rambling. And then the other side of that is, again, it's education. It's the lost skills of food preservation. So, you know, there is such a bounty out there. People all through the villages, you'll see they've all got these buckets of apples. They've got apples that they're putting outside because they've got too many for themselves to use. But if they knew how to put that apple aside in a jar for the winter, then they wouldn't have to be going and buying apples in January or March. And that's something that we've lost the ability to do unless you really, again, stop and think about it. And it takes time and effort to stop and think about it. So I think possibly what I can say is that you need to make it easier for the customer to do that thinking, to have the energy to change how they feel about things, because supermarkets exist because they're so useful. You know, you go into one shop and you can do everything that you need to get in one place. You don't need to go to the butcher and the greengrocer and the baker. And it is time consuming. And I think that's what a lot of people don't have at the moment. You know, they might be rich in some ways or they aren't, but whether they're rich or not, very few of us have time to spare. And I think that is really, really difficult for a lot of people to sort of think, yes, I want to do better in this way, but I don't have the capacity to make those changes. And especially actually in Bridport at the moment, we've got good quality butchers in town, but we don't have any dedicated greengrocers anymore in Bridport. They've all closed. Fruits of the Earth do fairly well. And Washing Pools and Modbury, if you're able to go out of town, they do fairly well. But they also, all three of them, rely on people like Riverford or other large suppliers who are importing it from further afield. So even those places who are trying to do it, you know, as well as they can, are still not able to do it locally. And in part, as again, that's an expectation of having things out of season. But it's also what can be grown here easily and how much it costs us to produce it. And it is, yeah, it's very tricky. Yeah, I don't know if I've got any anything more to say. The only other thing that I will add, which I don't think has been brushed on at all at the moment, is government funding. We at Tamarisk have been very lucky, but also I will say reliant on the government funding that has been available. We're a relatively large farm, but our stocking density is significantly lower than you'd expect based on the 600 acres that we farm. And that's because it's been done carefully with conservation in mind. So we're not trying to maximise the output from the livestock, we're trying to maximise the output from the conservation. And for a long time, the government has aided us with that by giving us money to do that, essentially. And at the moment, the inconsistent government funding is making it really hard to plan for the long term. We're aware, as Alasdair was saying, you know, if you want to be profitable, then you've got to consider how best you can do it. And we want to carry on doing the conservation work, but that does increase the price of what we produce because we're producing less per acre. And the government funding has helped us do that and stay solvent. And so with the current uncertainties, it's been really quite, I think disconcerting is the word to use, actually, to not know where we're necessarily going to be in the next few years, and wanting to be able to maintain the conservation work, but not knowing quite how that will fit into how we will have to change as a farm to make sure that we are able to carry on existing, full stop, really. Yeah, I think that's probably my ramble done.
Leila, thank you very much. And that's interesting, those last points as well, which, and the others, really, really just fantastic to hear. I feel I've already heard, yes, ooh, lots of things going on. Yeah, I'd like to hand over to John. John, if you would facilitate questions for the panel. So if you're happy to do that.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for that mind-blowing set of presentations. I have to say we had high hopes because we knew the quality of the speakers, but honestly, thank you so much. I think you've given us so much to think about, and I think you've shown that we are all in this together. And I think for us, we've seen so many hearts and hands and claps going up in this. We are with you in these conversations and this kind of challenge. So this is an opportunity for a few minutes for us to kind of ask you some questions, if you're happy with that. If you would like to ask a question, would you put your hand up and I'll call you in? And if you want to put your hand up, you'll find it under the reacts button in there, so you can raise your hand. I think it's probably easier because there's so many people. I won't necessarily spot if you're waving at me in real life. But anyone who'd like to start us off with some questions for any one of our speakers, we'll just have a few minutes of just any clarification or any thoughts that you might have had straight away, and then we'll have a bigger discussion as a group afterwards to really thrash out some of these questions. So anybody who'd like to start off with any questions for our speakers this evening? Paul, did I see you wave at me? Did you want to come in?
Yeah. Thanks very much. And it's been a fantastic meeting. I was only asked at midday today to come along. My name's Paul Kimber. I'm on the Portland Food Bank. And for my sins, I'm also on the Dorset Council. One thing I wanted to ask you is, at the moment, there is a plan, the Dorset Local Plan consultation is going on. I'll hold it up. Basically, it's about three big areas: housing, the local economy. And one of the things I've been listening to tonight is all of you are driving this local economy in a way I think is so important. And my first question is, have you thought about making statements to the local plan? It's quite easy to get. You've only got to go into Dorset Council website, local plan, and a lot of the great thinking that you've been putting together tonight is you could certainly make. I heard an issue about county farms, and I was once on that committee, and it's always heartbreaking for me when one of them gets sold, and knowing how well they actually work and giving young farmers a chance in life. The other point I'll make as well, I'm really glad to hear you talk about co-ops and cooperatives. For quite a time, I was on the co-op board, and part of that co-op board was Co-ops UK, and they can give you a great deal of assistance regarding forming a co-op and cooperatives and working together. I mean, that's their sole existence, and working to what we call values and principles. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much, Paul. Is there anybody in the speakers there who'd just like to pick up that thought, particularly around the feedback on the Dorset Council plan. I'm sure Andrew will be putting that into the chat just shortly if it isn't already there. But thinking about contributing to that kind of public debate and sharing feedback on those issues. Any thoughts about that kind of representation and getting stuck into that from Anna?
Yeah, I would recommend it. I don't live in Dorset. I live in Devon, and the businesses I work for are in Devon, and I've been involved in the Devon Food Partnership, which feeds into the Devon food strategy. And I think it's a very valuable process to be part of. And I would recommend it to any farmers, producers who want to have a voice and want to affect decision making, is to get involved and start talking with people and meeting them and networking. I think it's very good.
Thank you very
Um,
much indeed. Yeah,
uh,
Mary.
yeah. I must admit, no, it hadn't occurred to me to, what did you say, make a statement? Was that the word? So how is there a particular window of time in which one can do this? If so, when is it? And do you just go on the council website, and how does one go about doing it?
You go onto the council website and just put in Dorset Council. I'll hold this up. Can everybody see it?
Yeah.
There's also a link in the chat as well, Paul, and I think the date for consultation ending is the 13th of October, looking at the website. So there's still a bit of time to put some of these thoughts together and add your contributions, I think.
It's so
Thanks,
important
Sophia.
that you tell us you're struggling, or that what is being done, because it's so important that there is what we call a growth strategy, and we want to do things better and give people, if you like, people like yourselves, if you like, the doers in life, that opportunity to tell us what you want and go from there. There is a small part of the website does tell you how to fill it in as well if you're struggling.
Magic. Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks for the responses there. I will come back. I think I can see Michael in the queue talking about cooperatives and reflecting on other things like that as well in a moment. But Jane, I think you're next. Would you like to ask your question, share your thoughts?
Yes, hello. Good evening. It's absolutely fascinating, I must say. I wonder if any study has been done about the amount of food that is produced in a given area and the consumption of food there. I'm on the other end of it. I'm looking at food waste very often, and I can't get any statistics. I'm sort of moving blind, if you like, because I don't really know how much food wastage there is, genuine food waste, and where I might be able to find that kind of information.
I'm not sure about food waste figures, but I was looking back on a document before I came online, and in Exeter a couple of years ago, local sustainable food represented 1% of the entire spend on food. So it's incredibly low. We're coming from a very low place, and I know that Devon has a goal to reach 10% by 2030, which I think is ambitious in the current climate, but I hope that they do get there. So I know that side of the figures, but I'm not sure about the food waste figures.
I think people tend not to know.
And the more it's direct to, the more there's a direct link between the customer and the producer, the less waste there is, and the more you can do in time. So that's one of the things that we specialised in, was in time orders. So the farmers would only need to harvest as and when they got orders come through and things like that. So it's definitely local cooperative systems will help reduce food waste without even beginning to look at what happens in customers' fridges.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Jane. If you can look in the chat, there's some really good links in there that people have shared that might be a good starting point
Thank
or
you.
a jumping on point for that discussion as well. Some organisations and some reports and comments there. At the end of the meeting, we would like to harvest your emails so that we can send round the notes from this meeting, and also if you're happy for other people to contact you to carry on the conversation as well, so there'll be an opportunity to network and carry on these conversations as well.
Thank you.
That will come by. Thank you. Michael, would you like to add your comments?
Hi, sorry, it took me a minute to find my mute button then. Yeah, I just put that food surplus link in the chat there because I was looking at it today and just the figures underneath, those wrap figures of 9.5 million tonnes, but it also says that 3 million tonnes was additional to that with farmers. So there is still a lot of food going to waste in the food system, but that was all 2015. So maybe we've moved on since then, maybe we haven't. I've sort of been in this sort of food arena for about 13 years and sort of new entrant market gardener and food charity founder and working with the local council at the moment in BCP, Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch. And I really resonate with a lot of things that all of you said, a lot of the conversations we've been having recently about trying to create some sort of food hub locally, trying to keep food local, trying to support local farmers. I had a question I put in the chat about the kind of recent protests and kind of raising awareness of farmers and the struggle with obviously inheritance tax, but also just generically farmers across the board struggling, and been seeing some really good posts from farmers talking about, you know, the amount maybe they get for wheat in comparison with how much a loaf of bread is. You know, they're getting 11p per, you know, for wheat compared to £1.40 for a loaf of bread. And that kind of disparity there being, you know, uneven, and where all the production costs and probably the fake production elements of it in it as well are not really going to the farmers. So, you know, subsidy is having to bail them out. So I guess I've got a question around, are the farmers in the room more positive in the sense that there is an awareness raising in the community about it? Do they feel that their voices are being heard more? That's a question I've got. And also with me going I'm about to buy hopefully a sheep herd and start to move into some more animal agriculture. I've tried pigs this year and chickens, so kind of on my early stages of the animal element, but been doing market garden with veg for about 8-9 years now. So yeah, very, very, thankful for those comments though. And I'm going to watch this again on the recording and show it to loads of friends. So, yeah.
Thanks so much, Michael. Yeah, I mean, anybody who wants some inspiration, have a look at what Michael's been doing in BCP, not only through Grounded Community, the charity that the group, they do everything absolutely amazing that he set up, but also his role at the moment in BCP as a link between the council and the food web, I think across BCP is absolutely incredible. Would anybody like to comment on his reflections? What do you feel that collectively there is a tipping point we're reaching that is changing the attitudes and appreciation for farmers, or starting that journey? I know Leila, you were saying that Jeremy Clarkson seems to be part of that pivot point, maybe River Cottage, others. Do you feel hopeful that there is a growing appreciation emerging now of what farmers are facing and what the issues are with British agriculture and horticulture as well? Who'd like to jump in from our speakers? Alasdair, come on.
I can give my 2 cents, I guess. I feel that Clarkson's Farm has been one of the most important things for agriculture in a long time, just because of his reach. And again, it's fun, isn't it? It's very entertaining, and therefore people see farming as not only being important, but very difficult and potentially something they might want to get involved in. So I think Clarkson's Farm is really good for awareness. Some of what he does covers the sustainable aspect. Some of it is just conventional food growing, and that is equally as important for the wider public to understand about. With regards to the protests, I don't think they make a blind bit of difference personally. There's been no movement on inheritance tax. I wouldn't be surprised if the SFI doesn't come back at all. I'm not sure what the status of the equipment and the infrastructure grants is at the minute, but I know it's more and more hard to get involved. So I don't think the protests make a bit of difference. It doesn't actually change much policy, in my opinion, and it also definitely doesn't change the consumers' willingness to pay, and they need to be paying more. So unfortunately, no. But Jeremy Clarkson, albeit a divisive character, he does have a very big impact on how people see food and farming, in my opinion. And I'm really sorry I've forgotten the other point. There was a second question, wasn't there?
No, that was very much
just
on the button, actually, Alasdair. Thank you for that reflection. Really, really super. We'd like to move on, I think, unless I'm just looking to see if there are any other hands there. Oh, Anna, sorry, do you want to come in?
Can I just add on to, obviously I'm not a farmer, so I'm not responding to that, but to that whole disparity between like value added things and the simple product. So like the kilo price of grain versus the price of a loaf of bread. Because I think I know I work in a charcuterie, and we've had to buy new equipment recently, and just one single slice, we do several different products, and we have to have more than one slicer, and just one slicer alone is £30,000. So I think whilst the value added is a great way of making more income, it doesn't necessarily affect your bottom line. It doesn't necessarily affect how much disposable income you will have to make. And I think we should really value the unrefined item and the food stuff that we can then do something with at home. And I think it would be great to see a shift away from everything having to be processed in order to it be valued.
Brilliant.
I can really quickly add on to that, because that's the other thing I was trying to remember. You're talking about the grain of wheat price compared to the loaf of bread price. In my personal circumstance, if I was to only sell eggs to a packer, I would lose 3p per egg. So I have to be the packer, as I explained earlier, I have to be the packer and the marketer and sometimes the retailer or wholesaler. So yes, and I agree with that statement about adding value is often, sometimes it's worth it, but sometimes not worth it at all. But that's the added cost of the labour involved in regenerative practices, the additional feed costs involved in organic certified practices, and then all of your other costs on farming of different scales means that sometimes you're better off just having a contract for your produce, rather than trying to complicate matters and adding value, but not if you're going to lose money. As I've explained at the start, I'd lose 3p per egg, making it unviable if I was just to sell the egg to a packer.
Thanks, Alasdair. That's really helpful insight. Michael, did you want to come back in, or is that legacy?
Yeah, I just thank you for those responses. I think they're what I thought really. I think the Clarkson thing was just quickly, not to harp on about that, but my feeling watching it was there's some really good points. I just started a mushroom project, and every single person I mentioned it to go, "Oh, have you seen Clarkson's farm?" But actually on Clarkson's farm, he ended up it not working very well and coming up with all these problems. And I think part of the kind of imaging I see of that program, it sort of set it out to show that it is really hard. And I think it is really hard, and you do come up against problems, but I do wonder whether it's kind of trying to put people off as well, because obviously he's got stacks of money that he can plow into whatever he's got, like his £100,000 vehicles or whatever he's putting in. And I think the reality of it for certainly like a small scale, like a 6-acre farm or something like that, is you're working with what you've got, and you're kind of on a very low budget and a very low start point, and yeah, just trying to make it work with who's around you and what resources you have. So I think, yeah, massively different scale, I guess. And it is this sort of scale thing that I'm really interested in, as to how much we can produce locally and what we can do to kind of increase the capacity of others to be able to start these smaller scale operations, and see if working together we can actually cooperate to make it viable for more people to do this stuff. Yeah. So thank you for that. Really helpful.
Thanks, Michael. Brilliant comments as always. Sandra, your hand went up. Was that to nudge me forward to say that we'd like to have
No,
the
not
wider
at all.
conversation, or did you want to come in with a comment?
Well, it's a slightly different tack, really, but I had two thoughts. One was for Leila, that I'd just be interested to, because you are a larger farm, and I'd be interested to know what the wider market is that you sell into, if you're happy to talk about that. That was one question. Just to get a picture, really, of that side of things.
Yeah. So we have a little farm shop. So we do aim to sell locally as well, and our preference would be to finish as many of our own animals as we can and sell them locally. But at the moment we aren't able to do that, and so we work mostly with an organisation called the Organic Livestock Marketing Board. And they're essentially they're a middleman for us. They take a cut of the profits, but they will get people coming to them saying, I want some organically produced calves that I want to grow to rear on, or they want some store lambs or something, and so they broker for us a sale that we can go into. They also work with sort of supermarket contracts as well. So if we've got lambs that are finished, then we can send them through OLMC, and they will go straight into sort of what I would call the mainstream organic market. So I don't know where they'll end up at that point, but I know that they're going under their organic certification to be used in that way. That's primarily where we sell if we aren't selling from the farm shop itself. I think last year our store calves went to someone who farms on the Salisbury Plains, and I've been speaking to him, and he's probably going to take them again this year, which will be really nice. And again, this is where the certification is important, because it means that we can feed into these larger schemes, which has the benefit of being a good lump sum of money that comes in, and we don't have to worry about it. On a personal level, as I said, I would like to be finishing more of the animals ourselves. That's partly because it's good to know that we're sort of feeding the local market, and there's also sort of an element of, once you've let an animal leave your care when it's still alive, you don't know how that animal is going to end its life. And one of the things that we feel very strongly is that, if we're going to be breeding animals and growing them for the purpose of eating the meat, then it seems important to us that we give them the best life that we can until that point comes, and also that we utilize everything that we can. So we also do sheepskins and knitting wool and blankets and things like that, and we'd love to be doing leather works. There's potentially some ways forward with that through the PFL, but at the moment there isn't really anywhere we can do with that, which is a shame. But it's all about sort of utilizing everything you can. If you're going to do this, then it's only fair to the animal to give it the best best life you can. And yeah.
Thanks very much, Leila. That's really helpful. I'm conscious of our time together, and we would really like to invite you to have some time to reflect and talk amongst yourselves about the things that have been mentioned tonight. We do have the option to go into a breakout rooms, which I think is would be really good at this point to give us a bit more time to share. So I'm just looking for a nod from Sandra about being able to do that. When you're in your breakout room, please would one of you record or note down some of the kind of key things that you're talking about so that we can just have a super quick capture of that information. And if perhaps you were able to put it in some sort of typewritten form that could go into the chat, that would be really helpful, even if it's just the headlines of the themes that have been mentioned tonight that you were discussing in your breakout room. If you've got any wise ideas or additional contributions you'd like us to capture, then obviously that would be fantastic. We will be putting up more contact details so that you can carry on this conversation after tonight as well. But we'll put you into a breakout room, and you can have until I think it's about 8:45, so 10 minutes. Maybe we do 8. Can we do 8:50? Would that be possible, just to give us 15 minutes together?
Yeah, 8:50 would be great.
And then we can come back in, if you at that point you can bring in your notes to just drop into the chat when you come back into the room, and maybe we'll pick one or two to ask about and share with the group. So stand by. See you in the rooms. Welcome back. As you come in, if you'd be able to put some notes into the chat there so that we can capture some of the things that you've been talking about, that would be absolutely brilliant. I'm talking and typing so you can see what our little group was talking about. But just take a couple of minutes just to fill in your comments. Okay. Firstly, just to say thank you all for coming along this evening and for making this such a vibrant and fascinating, thought-provoking meeting. Huge thanks to our speakers. I think you certainly blown my mind. There's so much to think about. It's been really fascinating, and because of your authenticity and your integrity, my heart was moved a lot in what you were saying, not just my mind, and your ability to kind of stick with it, to see through it, to see beyond it, and to see the possibility is hugely inspiring. Yeah, my admiration personally for what you're doing is boundless, absolutely brilliant. I hope that this evening, as we suggested at the top of the conversation, will be a real springboard into our COP meeting in November. The link for that is in the chat right at the top. Thanks to Andrew and for his brilliant contributions in the chat. All the links you'll find in there are amazing. We will share them afterwards as well. But we really wanted to stir the imagination and to bring together some of the themes that we want to expand further and think about the actions that we can take together in that COP event. It's a whole day event, so there's a bit more time for us to kind of talk with one another and share ideas and bring some of this conversation into next steps, potential things we might do, things we might want to take into further discussions and further developments, and to see if we need to bring in more people into the conversation. So we've got a really diverse group here this evening, but have we got everybody who might be interested in this conversation? We had some apologies from people who couldn't come, who would have added a lot of additional richness to that as well, and so we'd like to sort of bring them into this next part of the conversation. The COP isn't the only place that this conversation will continue, and we will be sending information out from Dorset CAN and from Help and Kindness from the Feeding Dorset Partnership as well, that hopefully will inspire and bring this, continue this conversation and connection together. So many of you in the room are involved in projects that I think we could have showcased tonight, and we'd really like to be able to do that after this meeting. So if there's anything that you would like us to know about what you're doing and your interest and the things that you're taking up in terms of the challenges around this area of work, let us know, and we can incorporate that into our post-meeting emails and resource sharing. I'm just looking around the room, and there's just so many amazing things that people are involved in. That even the people that I can see in here on the first screen, it's like, my God, this is incredible. So can we bring all that forward and share that together? And if you would like to have any further conversations with us, with Sandra and I, would be very happy to facilitate that and put people in touch with one another. We've already had some discussions about that kind of link building and network building in our little small group that I was in. So anything that we can do to support that. Also, if you go away and think, damn it, I forgot to talk about, and there's something burning that sort of comes to mind in the middle of the night, as these things sometimes do, send them through and we will add it in as a kind of postscript. We don't want to kind of lose those moments of enlightenment and inspiration, because it's so much part of what we hope to be fostering within this Feeding Dorset partnership work that we're doing, particularly around this farming, horticulture and land use conversation at this point. Putting our feet on the soil, the place where we live, and standing alongside the people that are growing food locally and trying to make a living and make a difference is what it's all about. So on that note, I'm looking for Sandra. Is there anything in conclusion that you'd like to add?
No, I think that's really covered it. And just to say again, maybe for our speakers, thank you so much for your time and for coming along this evening. We couldn't do it without that generosity.
Absolutely. So I think if you're all happy, we'll give a round of applause to the speakers. Thank you to Sandra for arranging this, and thank everybody for coming this evening, and spread the word. This is good stuff, and there's good stuff happening across Dorset. Safe travels.